climate change questions there too. We're expecting to hear from the Prime Minister soon. He's in Adelaide today. We'll be playing you that interview shortly. Actually, we'll take a listen on that now.
For working up this policy, why didn't you run it past the Cabinet? Was this a captain's call?
Mark, you've been around a long time, and I started this discussion with my senior economic ministers before the budget. But as you know, once you go into campaign mode, Cabinet doesn't meet. And it's the normal process for those decisions to be taken by the leader and senior economic ministers, and that's the process that was followed in this case, as it's followed in all cases. What I do note is this, though, is Bill Shorten actually backed this policy before the full policy document had even been released. Now, I know he has a history of agreeing with people when he doesn't even know what they've said, but on this occasion, Bill Shorten agreed with a policy that he hadn't even seen.
Prime Minister, the budget was just 6 weeks ago. If this is such a good idea, why wasn't it in the budget?
Well, there was a campaign coming and an election coming, and we'd discussed a range of proposals as to what we would proceed with. And it was our decision to ensure that as we go into these final weeks of the campaign, that there would be a very clear focus on what the choice would be. A very clear option that we've put forward, which has been supported by the Property Council, by the Real Estate Institute, by the master builders, very positive responses we're now having in discussions with the banks about these issues. This is a program that's been successfully run in other jurisdictions in different guises, whether in Western Australia or New Zealand.
And it's a Hail Mary.
No, it looks like a great plan to get Australians into their first home. That's what it is. That's what it's doing. And the timing of our announcements are designed simply to ensure that people understand the clear choice. What we're doing is we're backing people to get into their first home. Labor is going to tax housing, which will undermine the value of your home and put up your rent. And that means there's a very clear choice this Saturday. If you don't want to undermine the value of your home, don't vote Labor. If you don't want your rent to go up because of Labor's housing tax, don't vote Labor. If you want to help first homeowners get into their first home through our first home loan deposit scheme and through our first home super saver scheme, which Labor will abolish, putting up the taxes on first home savers, if you want to keep that program, if you want to support that first home loan deposit scheme, and vote Liberal.
Prime Minister, will you bring back dividend imputation refundability if Labor abolishes it?
Well, we don't support that policy. That's why we're going to this election. I plan to win this election, which will stop that from happening.
So if they do abolish it, you'll bank the revenue?
Sorry?
You'll bank the revenue if they do abolish it?
We wouldn't be in government if they have introduced it.
We're going for another term?
I'm not countering hypotheticals about the Labor Party being in power or what would happen down the track.
I think retirees deserve to know where you stand.
Retirees deserve to know that on this Saturday, if they vote Liberal, they will stop Bill Shorten's retirees tax. Yesterday, I caught up with Rosalie, who I mentioned at the campaign launch. $1,800 out of her $30,000 income is what she relies on for her private health insurance premium that she pays. She pays for her private health insurance out of the $1,800 that she gets from her refundable franking credit. Now, Bill Shorten is going to reach into her purse and pull that away, pull it right out of there. That's what he is going to do to Rosalie, a former school teacher retired, earning just $30,000 a year, and he thinks it's fair. He thinks that $1,800 is a gift to her. I can assure you Rosalie doesn't think that at all. She's worked hard to make sure she's in that position. She's invested in Australian companies. She's set herself up for a retirement on the rules that had been known for 20 years and more. Labor and the Coalition both supporting those policies. Bill Shorten is pulling the rug out from under retirees, pulling it completely out and taking the money that they live on.
Prime Minister Paul Keating has given another interview this morning in which he's criticised the Coalition's approach to China. He says that the Coalition has failed to grasp the tectonic shift in power to China, and that we've based the relationship more on university dorm-style intelligence. Are we witnessing here a lack of bipartisan support on relation to China? Could this election be a fork in the road for Australia-Beijing relations?
Well, we will continue to manage our relationship with China as a partnership productively and constructively, with great respect. understanding the significant role they play in our part of the world, and we'll always maintain a very independent and strong stance about Australia's interests in relation to our relationship with China. But in raising the issue of China, Joe, I think you raised something very important about what's happening in the world today. We're seeing it played out, and I know Australians will have some worries about this. The major tensions between the United States and China and the trade tensions that exist and the impact that that can have on our global economy. And so at a time of such global uncertainty, particularly in our region, the idea of experimenting with economic policy as the Labor Party proposed with record new taxes, record new spending, I mean, this is a very reckless approach to be pursuing at a time like this. Now is not the time to turn back from the responsible economic management and stewardship that can see us through these uncertain times. Now is the time to continue on with that responsible and sober approach. Yes, investing in the important essentials that Australians rely on, hospitals and schools and roads. Hospitals and schools funding up for public schools and hospitals up more than 60% under our government, and they'll continue to increase without increasing taxes by responsible economic management. But Labor's experiment with the economy, undermining the value of your home, putting up rents as a result of their housing taxes, snatching money away from people like Rosalie who are retirees that they would use to pay for their private health insurance, that is not a risk. That is the bill you can't afford.
Why should the public be confident in the process to approve Adani's water plans when the CSIRO was pushed to approve those plans in just one afternoon?
The CSIRO and Geoscience had previously participated in the earlier review around those plans, and they had set out in that report the issues that would need to be mitigated by the proponent in order for it to receive their support. And they confirmed that they had met those requirements when their advice was support before the final approval was provided on those particular issues. So Geoscience and the CSIRO, they're independent organisations. They'll speak their mind. If they don't want to support something, then they won't. And they certainly wouldn't do that in writing if they weren't 100% behind it. And they did. I think what we were doing was we wanted to be assured by both of those agencies, and both of those agencies provided that assurance through their processes are up to them. Brett.
China,
yep.
Was it clumsy language yesterday to describe them as customers? Julie Bishop and Bill Shorten both have suggested that it was.
Well, I spoke to Julie yesterday, and she sent me a text this morning, and she said there's no difference of view between her and I, and she called that issue a beat-up. That's what Julie texted me today to say. So, look, I'm not going to be distracted by those issues going into the course of the election, people seem to manufacture these types of differences. What I'm focused on is the ground I'm standing here. And the ground I'm standing on is the ground of a first home that someone will own. And I want them to be able to get in that first home like Mr. and Mrs. Singh here. I want them to be able to realise their dreams and aspirations. I've cut their taxes on how they can save for their first deposit. And I've provided through this new first home loan deposit scheme an avenue for future first home owners to get on that first rung of the property ladder. And what I won't do is hit the housing and construction industry with a housing tax that will cost jobs, put up rents and undermine the value of your home. By voting Labor, you're voting to undermine the value of your own home and push up rents through Labor's housing tax.
On your housing policy, Mr. Morrison, Matthias Cormann says will have a firming effect on the market. That's another way of saying that house price will increase because of it, isn't it?
It's when the housing market has been soft, particularly in Western Australia, where we were speaking yesterday for about 5 years. The Sydney and Melbourne markets had been running at unsustainable levels in the high teens, and as a result of the controls we put on interest-only lending, what that did is it reduced the proportion of investors in the marketplace from 36% down to 27%. And what that meant is it took the investor steam out of the market and ensured that we dealt with, I would say, along with the budget position, the biggest single risk to our AAA credit rating. Now, when I was Treasurer, there were two things that were threatening our AAA credit rating. The first was hitting the budget surplus in 2021. And after successive budget updates and budgets, not only did we hit that mark, we actually brought it forward by a year, and ratings agencies were convinced. The other big issue was the overheated property markets in Sydney and Melbourne. And working with APRA and the Council of Financial Regulators, we worked together to put in place a set of prudential controls that would ease the growth in investor lending by dealing with the interest-only loans issues. Now, those policies have now been relaxed, and we've had a soft landing in the housing market, particularly in Sydney. And no, I'm answering your question. It's a serious question. I'm giving you a detailed answer. And so in Sydney and Melbourne, what we saw is an easing of that market, a softening of that market, and what I describe, and all the ratings agencies described, as a soft landing. Now, a hard landing in the housing market, which is what you get with Labor's housing tax, would not only disadvantage Australians who'd worked so hard to buy their home, what it'd also do is impact consumer confidence and the economy more broadly and put our AAA credit rating at risk. So a firming of the housing market is a positive thing at a time when it is softened, because people should have confidence in the value of their own homes, and I'm giving them that confidence through the policies that we're putting in place. Getting first home owners into the market is the point, and so the more of them there are, the better it is, and I make no apologies for getting first home owners into the market. I think it's a great thing, and so do all those who've come out in support of the policy.
So Joe asked you earlier about Paul Keating. He also said today that he's never seen a public figure in 50 years as mean as Peter Dutton, and entreated the electors of Dixon to drive a political stake through his heart. How do you respond to that?
I'm not going to get distracted by Paul Keating.
On climate change, the UN Secretary General was in New Zealand yesterday. He said that climate change is running faster than we are, and he was advocating a tax on carbon. Do you think that your government has done enough on this issue?
Yeah, I believe we're taking action on climate change. We're meeting our Kyoto 2020 targets. In fact, we're exceeding them. And we'll meet our 2030 target as well, because we have the plan to do that, and we've set that out. And one of the things I won't do, though, is I won't be costing Australians future jobs. What we're doing is meeting our environmental commitments as a good global citizen. We've seen renewable investment in this country surge to $25 billion between 2018-20. In 2017, it was $11 billion. That was the third highest per capita in the world and the seventh highest absolute. So I'd say when it comes to renewable energy investment, Australia is going through a renewable energy investment boom. And that is happening under the policies that we've been pursuing as a government. What I won't do is say to the workers in Gladstone, or workers in Western Australia, or workers out at Whyalla here in South Australia, I won't say to them that I'm going to make the company that employs you sends tens of millions, in some cases hundreds of millions of dollars, overseas to buy foreign carbon credits from who knows who to do who knows what, when that money should be invested here in Australian jobs, Australian wages, Australian innovation and Australia's future. Now, others can have their view on that, but I can guarantee you as a Prime Minister, I'm not going to tell companies and force companies to send their money offshore to pay for things in other parts of the world, when that money should be spent right here on Australians, for Australians' future.
You said that you hadn't been briefed yesterday on the Liberal candidate in Greenway, the comments that he had made. Have you now been briefed on that? And what about the Liberal candidate in Fraser, who's previously argued for a ban on gay couples adopting children?
But those are matters that are going to be dealt with by party administrations, and I don't tend to be distracted by them a few days out from the election.
How will they be dealt with, Prime Minister? How will they be dealt with, Prime Minister? How will they be dealt with?
I'm taking a question here. You've already had one.
But how will they be dealt with, Prime Minister? We had to do this game last week when you wouldn't say how they'd be dealt with.
I'm not being distracted by it.
How will they be dealt with, Prime Minister?
The party administration will deal with those matters. I'll leave that to them, and I'm not being distracted by it. We're 4 days out from an election, and what people are interested in is the home they want to buy, the rent they're going to pay, and under both of those things, their home will be worth less and their rent will be higher under the Labor Party.
But they're also interested in
party administration to do.
Can I ask you if you could clarify how your home loan scheme will work if a person defaults on a loan? Because they presumably have a relationship with the bank, but they'll now have a relationship with the government. Does this mean that the government
that's not
will
how it
come
works.
after? Could you explain
I'd be happy to.
what would happen?
I'd be happy to. The National Housing Finance and Investment Corporation, which I established when I was Treasurer, this is the organisation that has currently been capitalised and been able to raise its own, through its bond issuances, capital to support lending to affordable housing projects and community housing in particular. This is an organisation that's now been established. They will be capitalised to be able to enter into relationships with lenders, non-bank lenders as well. The priority will be with the smaller banks because we want to see more competition. And so our arrangements will be with the lender. The lender will have the relationship with the borrower. And that will enable the lender to manage and approve and assess and ensure that the borrower is in a position to meet those repayments under the set of arrangements they've been able to enter with the National Housing Finance and Investment Corporation.
They won't have a direct relationship with the government.
No, they'll have a relationship with their lender. They'll have a relationship with their lender.
If they do default, what then occurs?
Sorry, but one at a time.
If they do default, what occurs? Is the government on the hook for that default? For the 15%?
It's the same arrangement, and that's covered under the agreement between the bank and the Commonwealth.
I just wanted to clarify how many people would be eligible for this. Now, in the policy, it's 10,000, but yesterday you said it could be more.
Well, that's the estimate. It's 10,000, and the program, if it's very successful, and if there's an opportunity to extend it further, I say exactly the same thing today as I said to you yesterday. You know, if the program is a great success, which I believe it will be, then great. If the issue is that the program is actually seeing so many young people get in and buy their first home and get ahead of the curve and get on that first rung, well, I see that as something to celebrate. And if that puts a request to the government to consider expanding the scheme, then I will happily consider that at the time. Have we got any? We're in South Australia, we're in Boothby. If there's some local reporters who'd like to ask a question, I'd like to give them the opportunity.
Started an advertising campaign last night about climate.
Yep.
Nicole would be very aware of the fact that climate's been a big thing talked about by
Yep.
Get Up and Labor.
Yeah.
Bill Shorten classes as one of the three biggest issues in this election campaign. Would you class it in the top three, or where would you class it?
Well, I'd say it's a very important issue at this election campaign, but the thing that makes every other issue in the election campaign possible, the thing that enables Australia to do any of the things that they want to do, as I said on Sunday, depends on a strong economy and the ability to manage money. You can't go and invest in improving your climate and meeting your emissions reductions if you have a weak economy. You can't fund hospitals if you can't manage money. As we saw from Labor, when they run out of money, they come after yours, but when they can't manage money, they don't list medicines on the pharmaceutical benefit scheme, and they start running down investment in our defence forces. Now, here in South Australia, as Nick knows more than anyone, the big plan that we've got to support the submarines development here, this is huge for South Australian jobs. This is providing generational jobs for South Australia, going out as far as you can see. But none of this is possible unless you run a strong economy. All of these other issues are incredibly important, but only if you can manage money, only if you can continue to manage a strong economy. And as Joe said, there are some serious headwinds coming. There are some serious uncertainties out there between China and the United States. And you need a government that knows how to negotiate and manage that and ensure that our economy can remain strong and grow through that, just like as we have over the last 5.5 years, coming off the back of the mining investment boom. Let's not forget, stripped $80 billion out of the Australian economy, far bigger impact than we saw from the GFC in Australia. Yet we continued to grow and we continued to bring the budget back into surplus, as we were able to announce for the first time in 12 years at this most recent budget. And we did that by keeping expenditure under control and ensuring that we were investing in a targeted and proper way with the programs that we were putting in place, spending people's money wisely. So if you can't manage money and run a strong economy, you can't take action on anything else. And that's why I keep stressing, if you're taking action on climate change, which I am, then you need a strong economy and a strong budget. If you're increasing funding for public schools and hospitals, which my plan sets out, then you need a strong economy and you need to be able to manage money. And so all of these things hinge on that. And that's why I say the Labor Party is the bill you can't afford, because they have demonstrated they can't manage money. That's why they always come after yours. And what they're particularly coming after with their housing tax is the value of your home and putting your rent up. So thank you all for having us here today. Well, thank you very much.
We've seen protesters stand.
Actually, I will address that one, sorry, because that was a matter in another state. Look, taking action on climate change is important, But people have got to show, I think, a bit of consideration to others. I mean, for those commuters in Sydney this morning just trying to get across the Harbour Bridge and go to work, earn a living, pay their taxes, save for their first home, let's show a bit of consideration to others. We can all be passionate about the things we're passionate about. I can tell you I'm passionate about a lot of things. But I don't want to stop traffic on the Harbour Bridge because that would be inconsiderate to my fellow Australians. Thanks very much.
Yeah, Miss Flynn, can we ask you a question?
Okay, so that was live from Adelaide. The Prime Minister Scott Morrison there with a media conference. I believe that was in the electorate of Boothby. Nicole Flint is the member there. You could see her behind the PM. It's a marginal Liberal seat on 2.7%. The PM there questioned on the government processes on approval of Adani, the relationship with China, the first home owners scheme, among many issues. So election day is now only 4 days away. 2.6 million people have voted already. The AEC put out a tweet about that this morning, so that's significantly up on the pre-poll figures from last time. Now, an American explorer has found plastic waste on the sea